Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into a dense, multi-layered mystery straight from the Mahabharata. We're talking cursed mountains, bizarre celestial origins, and an elaborate royal scheme that honestly just proves human nature. Our desperation, politics, and deception literally hasn't changed in thousands of years. If you love piecing together complex myths and seeing exactly how ancient texts weave magic and destiny together, well, you are in exactly the right place. Let's get started.
So first up, we're looking at Hemakuta Hill. Now, this wasn't just some tough hike, okay? It was completely rigged with terrifying supernatural traps. The source text describes some genuinely bizarre phenomena waiting for anyone who stepped foot there. I mean, merely uttering a single word triggers gathering storm clouds and literal volleys of thousands of stones raining down from the sky. And it gets weirder. There are invisible fires burning morning and evening, phantom voices reciting sacred texts out of nowhere, and the sudden unnatural sadness and sickness that just strikes anyone who even looks at the terrain. Basically, it's an absolute supernatural no-go zone.
And all of this sheer chaos, it stems from just one man, Saint Rishyasringa. He lived on this peak for hundreds of years, totally devoted to his penances. But he was, let's say, exceedingly wrathful. Because he was so annoyed by people coming up and speaking to him, he literally cursed the entire mountain. His role was, whoever should utter any words here, thou must throw stones at him, and thou must call up the winds to prevent him from making any noise. It's basically the ultimate, ancient, heavily weaponized, do not disturb sign.
But actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a grumpy saint keeping people away. The plot totally thickens here. Indra, the lord of the gods, and his celestials were actually hiding out here too, performing sacrificial rites right on this hill. And when mortal men wandered over to take a look, the gods decided, nope, they did not want an audience. So they raised invisible barriers and constructed these massive illusions of hills to completely hide their presence from ordinary human eyes.
So what did ordinary travelers actually see? To mortal eyes, the landscape was perfectly disguised as sacred grounds. The earth was simply overspread with this sacred kusa grass, and the trees were shaped exactly like the wooden posts used for tying sacrificial beasts. They also saw the holy rivers Nanda and Kausiki. And this disguise was so incredibly potent that the text notes merely bathing in these waters instantly destroyed a person's sins.
Moving on to Section 1, the Hermitage of Kasyapa, where the mystery deepens.
Right, so here is where we meet Rishyasringa. The text presents us with this wildly intriguing figure. He's a powerful saint who was actually born of a hind. Yes, a deer. But what's absolutely fascinating here is his immense power. His sheer penance and austerity were so vast that he actually terrified the mighty rain god Indra. Just think about that for a second. The legendary slayer of demons, Indra, was legitimately afraid of a boy living out in the woods.
Now, as we read this ancient text, we find ourselves asking the exact same rapid-fire questions as the characters themselves, namely, how was the saint born of a hind? And for what reason was Indra afraid of that same sagacious boy? I mean, we really want to know exactly how a human saint comes from a deer and why a supreme god would cower before him, right?
Well, it all stems from this truly bizarre, destined chain of events. First, the creator, Brahma, curses a celestial daughter to become a deer, promising she's only going to be freed after giving birth to a saint. Fast forward, and a powerful saint named Vibhandaka is practicing penances by a lake, sees a beautiful celestial nymph, and his seminal fluid spills into the water. As destiny dictated, the cursed, thirsty deer laps up that exact water. Soon after, a boy is born to the deer, a boy with a single horn on his head, thus named Rishyasringa, the horned saint. And just like that, true to prophecy, the celestial deer is finally freed.
To really grasp his power, though, we have to look at his environment. We're talking absolute, unbroken solitude in the deep forest. He grew up perfectly continent, incredibly naive, and his entire existence consisted of rigorous spiritual penance. The text explicitly states that, barring his own father, this boy had never laid eyes on another human being. No way, right? But it's true. He literally has zero concept of the outside world or human society.
Okay, let's pivot to Section 2, the Cursed Kingdom, King Lomapada's drought.
So, we now have this stark contrast driving our story. Over in the forest, you have pure isolation, abundant spiritual penance, and a life entirely untouched by the flaws of human society. But meanwhile, over in the kingdom of Anga, you have a society deeply guilty of falsehood.
King Lomapada had lied to a Brahmana, causing all the priests to totally shun him. And as a direct result of this sin, the god Indra withheld the rain, plunging the entire kingdom into a terrifying, parched drought.
With the kingdom literally on the brink of starvation, the king begs his advisors for a solution. And his top priests propose a pretty wild one. They say the heavens will only grant rain if and only if the innocent, naive, forest-dwelling horned saint Rishyasringa is brought out of his isolation and into the king's territory. The sheer purity of this boy is basically the only spiritual counterweight heavy enough to break the curse and force the heavens to open up. But I mean, how do you get a phenomenally powerful, isolated saint who has never even seen another human to just pack up and move to a bustling city? King Lomapada makes a desperate plea to his ministers. How may the heavens grant us the rain? Think of an expedient. He's basically telling his council, look, you're my smartest, most practical advisors. You need to figure out a clever way to accomplish this nearly impossible task right now.
Which brings us to Section 3, the bizarre rescue plan, an ancient, elaborate heist. So the worldly ministers devise this highly tactical, multi-step plan. Step 1, before executing anything complex, the king must make atonement and appease the angry Brahmanas to lift their boycott, getting the spiritual side of his house in order, you know? Step 2, he convenes his most expert practical ministers to plot out the actual mechanics of the scheme. And Step 3, they decide to hire clever courtesans, women of the town, to venture into the deep forest and allure the naive saint.
But this isn't exactly a simple hiring process. These courtesans face a hilarious yet very real dilemma. When they're told of the plan, the women are completely confounded. On the one hand, they are terrified of King Lomapada's anger if they declare the business beyond their power. But on the other hand, they are absolutely terrified of the saint's powerful curse if they actually succeed in tricking him. I mean, they are caught entirely between a desperate king's wrath and a mystical powerhouse's magic. Talk about being between a rock and a hard place.
That is, until a mastermind steps forward from the ranks. An elderly or hoary woman confidently agrees to the job, but she demands a massive Black Ops budget to pull it off. She goes right to the king and asks for royal wealth, jewels of various kinds, and very specific resources to fund her elaborate, highly secretive operation.
The king essentially writes her a blank check, and the strike team departs. Armed with immense wealth, a hand-picked group of beautiful young women, and a highly deceptive plan, the elderly mastermind leads her specialized crew out of the parched city. They march directly into the deep, unknown, and highly dangerous forest to find that hidden hermitage. Which brings us to a massive cliffhanger for today. Will these courtesans actually succeed in luring this naive, overwhelmingly powerful saint away from the only home he has ever known? Or will his terrible wrath, much like that cursed mountain we started our journey with, destroy them before they even get the chance? This ancient text is a brilliant masterclass in suspense, completely contrasting the pure magic of the forest with the desperate politics of the city. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this really helped you visualize the incredible layers of this story, and I'll see you next time.